We don't notice the exact moment someone begins to disappear. It's not dramatic. There's no loud goodbye. No slammed door. No declaration. It's quieter than that. Like watching snow fall on an empty road. Soft, silent, slow. For 3 years, Emily had watched her husband Jack disappear without leaving. He was still there. Technically, his body sat at the same kitchen table every morning. His boots were still by the door. But the man she married, the one who once laughed so loud it shook the windows, who danced with her barefoot in the snow on their porch, he was fading. After the accident, Jack stopped speaking, stopped fixing things, stopped fighting. He just watched the world, as if it had nothing left to say to him. Emily tried everything. She cooked his favorite meals, read to him at night, Saturday in silence beside him, waiting for a sign that he was still in there. But nothing came, until one night the snow came. Before the silence, there was fire. Not just in the literal sense, though Jack was a firefighter, and a good one, but in the way he lived. He laughed with his whole chest. He told terrible jokes at dinner. He woke Emily at 2 a.m. just to see the stars. They met in their early 30s, both a little bruised by life, both surprised to find comfort in someone else's presence. Jack proposed on a Tuesday night over leftover spaghetti. No ring. No grand gesture. Just, hey, I don't want to do this life thing without you. And Emily, she never even hesitated. They didn't have much. Just a small house at the edge of town. A wood-burning stove that always needed fixing. And dreams that stretched longer than their paychecks. But they were happy. Really happy. Until the fire that changed everything. It wasn't just a blaze. It was a monster that swallowed a house, took 2 of Jack's crewmates, and left him broken on the sidewalk, half-burned, barely breathing, clutching the helmet of a man he couldn't save. That day, Jack stopped being Jack. His body came home, but his spirit stayed back there in the smoke, in the screaming. In the moment, everything went quiet. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of day no one remembers: gray sky, half-melted snow, and the same cold silence that had wrapped itself around their home for years. Emily had gone outside to shovel the steps again. Not because anyone was coming, no one ever did, but because routine gave her something the silence couldn't steal. She came back inside, brushing snow from her sleeves, and stopped cold. The kitchen light was on. That was strange. Jack hadn't touched the switch in years. Most days, he didn't touch much of anything. Then she saw him, not in his chair, not by the window, but standing, leaning heavily on the counter, his shoulders trembling from the effort, his hands white-knuckled on the worn edge of the wood, but standing. Emily didn't move. She didn't dare, afraid that one step, one sound, might break the moment like glass. Jack didn't look at her. He just stared at the old radio on the shelf. Then, slowly, as if the world had suddenly turned fragile, he reached out and turned the dial. The static gave way, and a voice broke through. Soft, crackly, some old country song about leaving and coming home again. Jack's eyes closed, only for a second, but when he opened them, something in them flickered. Not joy, not peace, but memory, and maybe the beginning of return. He lowered himself back into the chair, silent, still. But Emily stood in that doorway for a long time, hand still holding her snow shovel. heart racing like it hadn't in years. Because after everything, after the endless, brutal quiet, Jack had reached for music. And somewhere deep in that old song, Emily heard the softest whisper of hope. He's still in there. But hope, real hope, is a fragile thing. For the next few days, Emily watched for more signs. Another light switch turned on. Another glance toward the world outside. But Jack stayed quiet. Still, absent in all the ways that mattered. That Tuesday had been a flicker. And like most flickers, it faded. Then came the night she found him in the garage. It was past midnight. The house was silent. But Jack's bed was empty. Panic gripped her chest like ice. She searched every room calling his name, barely breathing. Then, she saw the light. The garage door slightly ajar. A soft hum echoing inside. Emily stepped in and found Jack slumped over the old workbench. Hands curled around a half-finished radio. Dust lay thick on every surface. But the scent of solder hung sharp in the air. He didn't look at her. Didn't say a word. Just sat there. Eyes hollow. Like whatever light had sparked days ago had burned out trying too hard. Too fast. Emily crossed the room slowly, knelt beside him, and placed her hand gently on his shoulder. It took him a moment, but he finally spoke. I thought I could fix it. His voice cracked dry and defeated. But I don't even remember how. Emily felt something crack open inside her. Not because he'd failed, but because he tried. Because even in all his brokenness, Jack had reached for something that once made him feel alive. She wrapped her arms around him, rested her forehead against his and whispered, "Then we'll remember together." Days passed, and the spark from that morning, Jack's first laugh in months, never returned. He drifted further inside himself again, retreating into long silences and blank stares out the kitchen window. Emily tried. She baked his favorite peach cobbler, played the old country songs he used to hum along to, even asked if he wanted to help fix the radio, the one he'd abandoned years ago. But Jack only shook his head. "I'm tired," he said once, and that was all. So Emily stopped asking, stopped hoping. Even she moved like a ghost through the house. The kitchen, the laundry room, the garage, each space held a version of Jack that didn't exist anymore. Even the snow outside felt colder this year. Hungrier. One morning, Emily sat at the dining table alone. A single cup of coffee steaming in front of her. The second cup stayed cold. Across from her, Jack stared at nothing, his wheelchair parked near the fireplace, hands resting in his lap like stone. The wind howled outside, shaking the windows. But inside, it was silent. And that silence, that was the hardest part. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It just lingered. Soft. Constant. And slowly unraveling whatever threads of hope she had left. The storm didn't ask for permission. It roared in just after midnight, a sudden, brutal howl that slammed against the windows and snuffed out the power like blowing out a candle. Emily shot upright in bed, the room already growing cold. Darker than usual. She reached for the flashlight on her nightstand. Heart thudding. The furnace had gone silent. No hum. No heat. Just the sound of snow piling fast against the glass. She threw on her robe and padded into the hallway. Jack was already awake, sitting by the kitchen window, the same place he sat most nights. But this time, something was different. His eyes weren't vacant. They were alert. Then, the radio crackled. Not the new one they rarely used, but the old emergency CB unit Jack had kept in the cabinet, dusty and forgotten. Anyone out there? This is Ruth Miller on Elm. My generator's out. The cold's. It's getting to me. Her voice trembled. Please. Anyone? Emily froze. Ruth was nearly 80. She lived alone. For a moment, the house stood still. No sound but the wind and Ruth's voice fading in and out through static. Then Jack moved. He rose slowly, steadily. No hesitation. No confusion. He walked to the hall closet, pulled on his old fire department jacket. It still smelled faintly of smoke and cedar. He grabbed the flashlight. Gloves. Boots. Emily could barely breathe. Jack, what are you doing? He zipped up the coat. We're going, he said. Voice rough. She won't make it through the night. Emily blinked. Stunned. He hadn't spoken that clearly in months. But Jack. The snow outside was waist deep. The wind was screaming. He looked her in the eyes for the first time in what felt like forever. Get dressed. I know that house. I know what to do. It wasn't just the words. It was him. And for the first time since the fire, Jack Thompson, the man who once ran toward flames when everyone else ran away, was back. They stepped into a world of white and wind. The snow howled like a living thing, slashing across their faces as they pushed forward through knee-deep drifts. Emily stumbled twice, but Jack held her arm steady, firm. Focused, eyes scanning ahead like he was back in the field. No hesitation. No fear. Only instinct. By the time they reached Ruth's small house on Elm, the front porch was buried in snow. The windows glazed over with frost. Jack didn't even knock. He kicked the door open with a practiced move, calling out her name. Ruth, it's Jack and Emily inside. The cold was crushing air, still and bitter. Ruth lay curled under a thin blanket, her lips pale, barely conscious. Jack sprang into action. Emily, grab all the blankets you can find. We need to warm her core. Get hot water bottles if we've got any. Wrap her hands and feet. His voice strong, commanding, echoed through the silence. Emily moved without thinking, watching him check Ruth's pulse. Elevate her legs. Cover vents with towels to trap what little warmth remained. It was like a switch had flipped. This wasn't the man who sat silent by the window, lost in memory. This was Jack, the captain, the one who led his crew into burning buildings. The man who once carried 3 children out of a collapsing house and never said a word about it afterward. When the lights flickered and came on for half a second, Emily caught a glimpse of Jack's face, sharp, alive, locked in a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. And in that frozen house, as they fought the cold inch by inch, Emily realized something she hadn't dared hope for. The fire inside him had never died. It had just gone quiet, waiting for a reason to burn again. By morning, word had already spread. The neighbors talked. The radio station mentioned something about an old firefighter braving the storm to save a life. People started calling, texting, asking, was that Jack Thompson, our Jack? It started small. A knock at the door, a tin of cookies wrapped in a dish towel, a thank you card in shaky handwriting from Ruth's granddaughter. Then came the others. Bags of groceries on the porch, fresh logs for the fireplace, even a handmade quilt, left on their doorstep with a note, heroes don't retire. They rest until they're needed. Jack didn't say much. But Emily saw it the way he stood a little taller, the way his hands lingered on the notes before placing them on the mantel. Then, one day, an old red pickup truck rolled into the driveway. 3 men stepped out, all gray around the edges, all in fire department jackets that had seen better years. Jack's crew. They didn't say much, just handed Jack a box wrapped in a faded flag. Inside, his helmet, his captain badge, and a photograph. Jack standing in front of Engine 9, grinning, arms around his team. "We kept it for you," one of them said. "Never stopped believing you'd find your way back." Jack's hands trembled as he picked up the helmet. Emily saw his jaw tighten, eyes shining in the pale morning light. He didn't cry. He just nodded a slow, steady nod that said everything. That night, the mantle was full. The helmet, the badge, the photo, and all the quiet gratitude from a town that never forgot the man behind the silence. That night, the storm had long passed, but the house was still wrapped in a silence that had become too familiar. Emily sat at the edge of the bed, sleep nowhere near her eyes. The glow of the old nightlight hummed softly behind her, casting long shadows on the wall. She stared at the photo of Jack in his captain's helmet, now resting on the nightstand. It still didn't feel real, any of it. Then, from the kitchen, a sound. Not the creak of old wood, not the hum of the fridge, but something that stopped her heart completely. A voice, low, warm, laughing. Emily stood up like she'd been struck by lightning. She didn't breathe as she tiptoed down the hallway, hands trembling. And there he was, Jack, sitting at the kitchen table talking. Across from him sat Ethan, the teenage neighbor, wide-eyed and grinning. The two of them sipped cocoa from mismatched mugs, and Jack was telling a story. "So, we're halfway through the blizzard, and my radio shorts out. Just static, dead silence. But I remembered something my old captain once said. If your tools fail, your mind better not." So his voice was calm, confident like the Jack from before. Emily covered her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. Because it was real. This moment, it was really happening. Jack noticed her, paused, and for a heartbeat, their eyes met. He smiled. Not the polite smile he used when people stared too long. Not the hollow one he forced when someone asked how he was. No, this smile was his. The one that said, "I remember who I am now." Then Jack said, "That kid reminds me of me when I still believed the whole world could be saved." Emily fell to her knees, sobbing not from grief, but from the overwhelming relief of hearing the voice she thought she'd lost forever. And in that moment, the house wasn't silent anymore. The days after the storm passed slower than snow melting in the sun. But something had shifted, not outside, but within the house. Jack didn't retreat to the shadows anymore. He sat by the window still, but now with purpose, tools spread out across the table, fingers busy fixing the old emergency radio. Emily watched him from the kitchen doorway. He was humming, just a little, just enough, like a man coming back to himself. One note at a time. They spent the weekend rewiring old circuits, replacing bulbs in the backup generator. Jack even pulled out a hand-drawn map of the neighborhood and marked every house with elderly residents. "Next time," he said, "we won't wait for help. We are the help." That afternoon, they visited Mrs. Alder, the woman Jack had helped during the storm. She wrapped both of them in a hug that smelled like lavender and wood smoke. tears in her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you for coming back." She wasn't just talking about the visit. Emily knew that. They went house to house checking heaters, installing basic first aid kits, setting up walkie-talkies for the next time the phones go dark. Jack moved slowly, but with confidence. Ethan followed behind, learning, asking questions, watching every move. At sunset, they all gathered on Jack and Emily's porch. Ethan leaned on the railing, sipping hot cider. Jack sat beside Emily in the old rocking chair, his hand resting lightly on hers. The snow had softened into a glittering blanket over the town. Lights flickered on one by one, a small constellation of life continuing. "I never thought I'd see this again," Jack murmured. Emily turned to him, her voice gentle, what his smile was quiet. "You, me, us, moving forward, not just surviving, but living again." And for the first time in a long time, Emily didn't feel like she was holding everything together alone. Hope didn't come crashing in like a miracle. It came like this, slow, steady, rebuilt, with every step, every circuit, every word whispered in the quiet after the storm. Emily sat by the fire that evening, her knitting untouched in her lap. Through the frosted window, she could see Jack in the garage, not hunched or hiding, but laughing. Ethan sat beside him, handing him tools, as Jack explained how to repair a circuit box with patience and precision. That laugh, it wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind that wrapped around the heart like a blanket still warm from the dryer. The storm had taken so much from them, but somehow, in its fury, it had given something back. Jack didn't magically become the man he once was. He became something better, a survivor who knew silence, who had touched the edge and chose to come back. That night, as the last embers died in the fireplace, Emily picked up the old emergency radio and turned it on. Static at first. Then, a faint voice, bass to Jack. "You still listening out there?" Emily froze. Jack stepped through the door just in time to hear it. He reached out and took the radio from her hands. "Copy that," he said, voice steady. "I'm here." His fingers brushed hers. And in that simple contact, there was more truth than 1,000 speeches. Emily turned toward us now, toward the audience, and said quietly, "I thought I'd lost him forever. But sometimes, it's in the heart of the storm that we finally find the people we love again. Not the way they were, but the way they were meant to be broken, rebuilt, and finally, real." Sometimes, healing doesn't come all at once. It tiptoes back into our lives, through cracked voices, shared memories, and quiet acts of love. If this story reminded you of someone you've almost lost or someone you fought to bring back, drop their name in the comments below. Let their story live on. Let their memory matter. Tell us, have you ever weathered a storm like this, literal or emotional? Your words might just be the light someone else needs tonight. And if this story moved you, hit like to let us know. Subscribe for more stories about quiet strength, unseen heroes, and the kind of hope that never dies. And don't forget to share it with someone who still believes that even after the darkest storm, there's still warmth waiting on the other side. We're life unsipped. Thanks for watching. And remember, the smallest ember can still light the way home.